The moment began with an almost theatrical confidence from her opponent. He leaned into his microphone with a smirk, certain that the line he had prepared, plucked directly from the words of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, would corner Jasmine Crockett in front of the nation. He quoted RBG as if those words were a weapon, a final blow that would silence Crockett and leave her fumbling for a response. The chamber grew still as his words echoed, and for a brief moment, he believed he had won. But Crockett's face betrayed no panic. She didn't fidget with her papers, she didn't break eye contact, and she didn't flinch. Instead, she folded her hands calmly on the desk, the faintest smile tugging at her lips. The aftermath of that exchange lingered in the chamber like the residue of a storm. For several minutes, the air carried a mix of unease and awe, as though everyone was trying to process what had just unfolded before their eyes. Crockett had not only disarmed her opponent, she had flipped the entire narrative on its head. The congressman who had entered the moment so assured now sat slouched, his posture betraying the weight of his miscalculation. He tried to busy himself with his papers, but the damage was already done. His attempt to invoke Ruth Bader Ginsburg against Crockett had backfired spectacularly, and no amount of rustling pages could distract from the embarrassment settling around him. Meanwhile, Crockett remained composed, her gaze steady, her demeanor unchanged. She had delivered her blow and left it to hang in the air, confident that its impact needed no further embellishment. Observers in the gallery whispered to one another, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others grinning as if they had just witnessed a masterclass in political combat. Reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks, already framing the story in their minds, a congresswoman outmaneuvering her opponent with both grace and precision. The cameras had captured everything, and Crockett knew the clip would spread like wildfire. Yet she did not dwell on that. Her focus was still on the work at hand, on the issues being debated, because for her, these battles were never just about theatrics, they were about principle. That distinction set her apart. While others sought moments to score points, she turned those moments into platforms to reaffirm values. Her colleagues, even those who rarely aligned with her politically, could not deny the strength she had just displayed. A few leaned back in their chairs, glancing at her with a mix of respect and wariness. They had seen how quickly she could dismantle a faulty argument, how she could expose the fragility of words used without integrity. It was a reminder that engaging with her carelessly came at a cost. Crockett's ability to pivot under pressure, to transform an attempted attack into a rallying cry, made her a formidable force in the chamber. And in that moment, everyone recognized it. The man who had quoted Ginsburg attempted to recover, clearing his throat and shuffling through his prepared remarks. But every word that followed felt deflated, like air leaking from a balloon. The authority he had tried to project was gone, and no amount of bluster could bring it back. Crockett had shifted the narrative so completely that even as he spoke, the chamber's attention wasn't truly on him anymore, it remained fixed on her. She had seized control of the moment, and once she had it, she refused to relinquish it. His words were reduced to background noise, while hers continued to echo in the minds of those listening. Outside the chamber, the world was beginning to react. Clips of the exchange spread rapidly on social media, framed by captions that celebrated Crockett's composure and brilliance. She flipped the script. One trending post declared, another read, "Don't come for Jasmine unless you're ready for this level of fire." Within hours, hashtags carrying her name trended across platforms, the footage replayed in countless feeds. Commentators on cable news shows began looping the clip, dissecting her every word, praising the way she had taken a weapon aimed at her and turned it into a shield that reflected back at her opponent. What had been meant as her undoing had instead elevated her profile even further, amplifying her voice to audiences who may not have followed her closely before. Back inside, Crockett's composure remained unshaken. She did not revel in her opponent's faltering, nor did she gloat. Instead, she carried herself with the same steadiness she had shown throughout the exchange. That steadiness itself was part of the impact. She was not rattled, not reactive, she was deliberate, precise, and principled. It sent a message that went beyond the words she had spoken. It showed that she was unshakable under pressure, that no amount of political theater could break her focus. That image, just as much as her fiery words, was what resonated with those who watched. Her colleagues on her side of the aisle exchanged subtle nods, recognizing the strength she had displayed. Some whispered quietly to one another, their expressions betraying pride. They knew that what Crockett had done was not only a defense of herself but a defense of truth, of honesty in debate, of the legacies of women like Ruth Bader Ginsburg whose words deserved better than to be misused. It was more than a clapback, it was a reclamation of integrity in a space too often dominated by distortion. The congressman who had started it all sat quietly now, his attempt at a counterattack abandoned. His papers lay untouched before him, his earlier swagger nowhere to be found. It was clear to everyone that he had lost the moment decisively, and worse, that he had handed his opponent a victory of even greater scale than she might have achieved otherwise. Crockett hadn't just defended herself, she had gained ground, strengthened her reputation, and reminded the chamber that attempts to silence her only made her voice louder. As the session moved forward, Crockett continued participating with the same vigor she always brought, but those in the room knew that the defining moment had already passed. She had left her mark in a way that would be remembered long after the day's debates ended. The viral clip would ensure that, but even without the cameras, those present understood they had witnessed something extraordinary. Crockett had stood in the face of a calculated attempt to undermine her and had transformed it into a triumph that resonated far beyond the chamber walls. By the time she left the room later that day, the buzz around her was unmistakable. Staffers, reporters, even colleagues from across the aisle approached her with comments, some congratulatory, some begrudgingly respectful. She handled each with the same calm composure, not indulging in the spectacle but acknowledging the impact. She knew that moments like these mattered, not because they boosted her profile, but because they reminded people watching that truth could still cut through noise, that integrity could still prevail when wielded with strength and clarity. The third act of the moment was not confined to the chamber, it unfolded in the ripple effects that spread across the country once the footage reached the public. Within hours, the clip of Jasmine Crockett's fiery rebuttal was everywhere, on cable news, on podcasts, and plastered across social media platforms with captions that spoke to the power of what people had just witnessed. The scene had all the ingredients of a viral political moment, a calculated attempt to trap her, the invocation of an icon like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and Crockett's ability to dismantle it with sharp precision and undeniable conviction. Yet what gave it staying power wasn't just the performance, it was the principle behind it. Viewers recognized authenticity when they saw it, and Crockett's refusal to let history be distorted resonated deeply in a political climate saturated with manipulation. On Twitter and TikTok, users clipped her lines into 15-second bursts of fire, looping her words over captions like, "Don't mess with Crockett," and "RBG would be proud." People who had never paid close attention to congressional hearings before found themselves sharing her speech with friends and family, remarking on how refreshing it was to see someone speak with both respect for history and the courage to confront dishonesty head-on. Comment threads filled with praise. "This is why we need more voices like hers," one read. Another simply said, "She ate and left no crumbs." The digital echo chamber had transformed her rebuttal into more than just a moment, it became a rallying cry. Cable news commentators joined the chorus, each offering their take. Some praised her rhetorical brilliance, noting how rare it was for a lawmaker to balance reverence with rebuttal so seamlessly. Others admitted, perhaps reluctantly, that even those who disagreed with her politics had to acknowledge her command of the room. She had demonstrated not only intelligence but an unshakable composure that made it impossible to dismiss her. On panel shows, analysts replayed the clip, stopping mid-sentence to dissect how she shifted tone, how she pivoted from defense to offense, and how she managed to tie everything back to principle. To many, it felt less like a political skirmish and more like a turning point, a reminder of what authentic leadership looked like. Meanwhile, the congressman who had tried to use Ginsburg's words against her was quietly drowning in the fallout. Clips of him smirking before delivering his failed blow circulated alongside Crockett's takedown, creating an unflattering before and after effect that painted him as not only wrong but careless. Editorials mocked the miscalculation, framing it as a textbook case of underestimating one's opponent. Headlines in major outlets ran variations of the same theme: Crockett turns the tables, how a failed attack became a viral lesson, and the day RBG's legacy was defended in real time. His name became secondary to hers, mentioned only as a foil in a story about her strength. But for Crockett, the true significance of the moment was not in the memes or the headlines. It was in the deeper conversations it sparked. Community leaders, activists, and educators began referencing her rebuttal as an example of how to confront distortion with clarity. Law students watched the clip in classrooms, discussing not only her rhetorical strategy but the importance of contextualizing legal thought. In women's groups, her words became a point of pride, a reminder that attempts to belittle or trap women in positions of power could be overturned with intellect and fire. For those who had long felt that voices like Ginsburg's were being twisted or diluted, Crockett's defense felt like a reclamation. She herself remained grounded through it all. In interviews that followed, she emphasized that her goal had not been to go viral, but to ensure that the truth was not misrepresented. She spoke about the responsibility of lawmakers to honor the legacies of those who came before them, particularly trailblazers like RBG, not by quoting them selectively but by carrying forward their broader vision of justice. This humility only deepened the public's respect for her. While the internet buzzed with celebration, she redirected the attention back to the issues at stake, reminding people that these debates weren't about personal wins or losses, they were about the future of the country. In the days that followed, Crockett's words continued to resonate. Her supporters felt energized, her critics were forced to acknowledge her skill, and the political landscape shifted slightly in her favor. What had begun as an attempt to undermine her had ended in the strengthening of her platform. She had demonstrated that integrity and courage could not only survive in the glare of political theater but thrive in it. Her rebuttal had become more than just a moment of defense, it was a statement of who she was and what she stood for. By the end of the week, the exchange was still being discussed, proof of how deeply it had cut through the noise. Crockett had not merely silenced her opponent, she had given the public something to hold onto, something that reminded them of the power of truth spoken without fear. It was the kind of moment that didn't just fade into the archive of political clips but lingered, replayed, and reinterpreted as a symbol of strength. And for Jasmine Crockett, it was yet another confirmation that her voice, unwavering, principled, and fierce, was one that could not be ignored, no matter how hard others tried to use the past against her.